All right, so in part one, the piece that students have the most trouble with is probably stratified versus cluster sampling. So just a reminder of what the difference is. They're both involving groups, which is why students tend to get caught up on, which one is which. They see the grouping, and then sometimes they get lost in this idea of like heterogeneous versus homogeneous groups. And I don't want you to get caught up on that, because as you saw in the knowledge checks, I can use the same grouping, like acres on a farm, to justify stratified versus cluster. So the big difference here is in a stratify, the thing that we sample are the actual observational units. So we're going to sample the things that we're taking data on. And we're going to do that from each group. So you can usually use this keyword of from each to make sure you're in the right place. But the key to all of this is really paying attention to what we sampled. Did the random sampling happen to people, or did it happen to households? Did it happen to plants, or did it happen to acres? That's the piece that matters. Because in a cluster sample, we're going to sample groups. And then once we have our groups, all the people or all the individuals in that group are in the sample. Very wordy, I know. Again, you sort of have a keyword to patch on the back here. You usually see all as a way to say like, okay, I randomly sampled that acre and then I went out and collected information about all of the plants, or I randomly selected that household and then I got information about all of the occupants. But again, the most important thing here is the sampling unit. Our sampling unit is groups as opposed to the actual observational units or things that we're collecting data on. So that's the big key. I typically give an example of being like a quality control person at like a potato chip factory. And a potato chip factory, we have a nice setup of grouping, right? There are individual chips inside of the bags themselves. So the chips would be our individuals or the things that we might actually observe, and the bags might be our groups. So if I were in that quality control situation, if I were doing a stratified sample, I would eat maybe 2 randomly selected chips from every bag in the entire store or in the entire plant. So this would be a great sampling method, right? Because I would make sure every bag was great, but I'd also ruin every bag in the process. But again, this is all about here. I'm sampling the chips, and then I've got that keyword of from every or from each, saying that, okay, this is going to happen to every single bag, every single grouping mechanism that we had. Versus a cluster, we would switch this up. Instead of randomly selecting the chips, we would randomly select, say, 2 bags, and then we would eat all the chips. So in this case, we know the entire bag is good, but we only know this about 2 bags, and who knows what's happening with the rest of the production line. So cluster is definitely more efficient. It wouldn't ruin all of our bags of chips, but it doesn't give us quite the same level of precision that a stratified sample would.